I'm Eugene Mulero with Transport Topics, and joining us in the studio today is Keith Lang, Washington correspondent with the Detroit News. And Keith, before we talk about the continuing resolution and what Congress does to keep the government funded past the December 9th funding deadline, there is going to be a roundtable tomorrow, Tuesday, on the House Highways and Transit Subcommittee that's going to be looking at autonomous technology. Can you tell us what you're going to be looking for in that roundtable?
I think the most interesting thing to look out for in the hearing that the roundtable, excuse me, is going to be this interplay between NHTSA and their push to set up a framework, the guidelines they've rolled out this year, and how that is going to be implemented in the Trump administration. This is going to be a thing that has started in the Obama administration, which has one worldview, and it's going to have to be finished necessarily by the Trump administration. And so I think it'll be interesting just to watch. This is the first time that Congress has had a chance to meet to discuss autonomous vehicles since the election. So it'll be interesting to watch how the discussion has shifted since the last time they had one of these events.
You've written about the concerns from industry, and another concern is the potential that this technology, when it's really introduced and it blossoms, that it has the potential of affect the marketplace and the employment marketplace.
Yeah, that's kind of an underreported aspect of this whole discussion about self-driving cars. There's a lot of focus from advocates on the potential safety benefits and efficiencies, especially in the commercial sector. You could get all sorts of efficiencies in deliveries. But there is some discussion that's happening now on the Hill about the potential for job losses, especially in sectors like the trucking industry or in the taxi cab industry. If your Uber is now driverless, then what happens to the person that is making money driving the Uber? There hasn't been any answer to that yet, but it is a discussion, and it's going to be a discussion that will probably get more attention in light of the most recent election.
And we have, Congressman Sam Graves, Republican of Missouri, leading this roundtable. What's your expectation that it's going to be his subcommittee that's going to lead the way on the policy writing on autonomous vehicles in the next year and during the next Congress?
I think this is going to be a topic that touches multiple committees, just as it touches multiple sectors of American life. It's a transportation story, but it's also a technology story. They're going to have committees that are competing for jurisdiction. And even now you see sort of jockeying as NHTSA is trying to craft these guidelines. You have states like Michigan and California that are trying to craft their own rules. Michigan and California are sort of in an arms race to see who's going to be the next motor city, for lack of a better word. And they both have bills moving in their legislatures, and NHTSA's effort is in part an effort to set up a national framework to stop states from having their own rules, because if California requires you to have a steering wheel and Michigan doesn't, then that makes it difficult for interstate commerce.
And we're hearing that, the concern that you could have the states come up with their own rules. You hear that from the transportation groups, the trucking industry is bringing it up, and even you have concern with the auto industry bringing that up as well. What, going forward, when you hear that it's going to take, for members of Congress, it's going to take 5-10 years for this technology to come into fruition, if you can, go look into your crystal ball, and do you think that that is a good estimate, or is the future really, here? We're already seeing autonomous trucks making deliveries, and we're seeing the technology moving forward right now.
I think it's a mixture. I don't think there's going to be a day necessarily where we flip a switch and say all the cars now are driverless, and that's actually one of the most challenging things for regulators now, is they're having to craft guidelines or rules that aren't limiting as people are wanting to test, but they also have to consider that the initial wave of autonomous vehicles will be interacting with traditional cars on the roadway and traditional trucks on the roadway. So that's a kind of gray area that everybody's feeling their way through. If, Ford, for instance, says they could have a driverless car by 2021, but that car that they're talking about would be used for ride-sharing fleets,
okay,
not for an individual driver. They say that's far off. I was at a panel discussion this morning with a Ford representative that said that their their broader picture on self-driving cars is more like 2030, but the headline was 2021. But it's there's already, Tesla has their autopilot out, and that got a lot of attention this summer. So it's going to be a thing that as technology advances and cars are going to become more integrated and more connected, and there's a race to see who can get to fully self-driving first, but there's going to be a lot of steps on the way.
And this autonomous regulation is something that the Obama administration is going to hand off to the Trump administration, and we saw Trump select Elaine Chao, the former Secretary of Labor, to be his Secretary of Transportation. Obviously, she needs to be confirmed by the Senate. What did you hear from your sources, the industry, about the announcement of Elaine Chao?
I spoke to a couple of consumer safety groups that were worried that she might try to roll back some of the regulations that have been put in place by the Obama administration on autonomous vehicles. But I think this is an area where there's pretty much universal agreement that there needs to be some sort of baseline. So I don't think that it'll be an area where the Trump administration is completely hands-off. It's kind of similar to drones in aviation. It's a technology that's moving very rapidly, and Congress and regulators are trying to catch up.
And it was interesting to read her statement that the transition team put out, that she touted, the president-elect's infrastructure plan, and that she was going to be a driving force in trying to, from the cabinet position, work on a long-term funding fix. What role do you see her having in infrastructure when she goes over to DOT?
I think that depends on how much of a push the president-elect makes for his infrastructure plan. He talked a lot in the campaign about having $1 trillion infrastructure plan. If that's something he pushes for instance, in the first 100 days, then Elaine Chao will be right in the spotlight. If he focuses on immigration, for instance, or any of the other topics that were a part of his successful campaign, then she might be kind of in the background. I think it's too early to tell. A lot of it depends on what the congressional agenda looks like once the new Congress takes office.
And we already made the comment that she's married to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and there's really hasn't been any big outcry in the Senate about her nomination. So we expect us. Do you expect a swift confirmation?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if she's unanimously approved, like Secretary Fox was. But there hasn't really been anybody. Senator Chuck Schumer, who is the incoming minority leader, had kind words to say about her, and said that if the president-elect is serious about an infrastructure boost, that was an area that he could work with, and he was looking forward to working with Secretary Chao. So I don't foresee a big fight when her confirmation comes up. And
then lastly, going back, Congress, we expect House Majority Leader, he told reporters on Monday that the continuing resolution to keep the government funding for sometime into the spring, maybe early summer, will be coming out on Tuesday, and they have a December 9th funding deadline. From where I'm sitting at, I'm not hearing that there's going to be any controversial policy writers on trucking related matters. But what are you hearing on the continuing resolution?
Well, it's one of those down to the wire deals that Congress has been specializing in the last couple of years. They have basically 4 days to fund the government. I don't think they want to start the Trump administration with the shutdown government, though maybe. But it's the rider situation is always very fluid in the last couple of days. It'll be interesting to watch to see what gets in or out. Sometimes what gets left out is as newsworthy as what gets left in.
Okay, Keith, we're going to continue reading your reporting in the Detroit News. And check out ttnews.com on Tuesdays for Capital Agenda. Thank you.